Welcome. You've clicked yourself onto Three Guys and an iPad, the only mortgage-focused podcast to neither condemn nor condone the wearing of masks during a podcast. I'm, of course, Brian Rieger. I'm one of those three guys, and I am the co-founder of Content Beacon. And when I say the word co, that means there's another one of us, and that would be our dear friend Rick Grant. Rick, how are you today?
Doing well, Brian. Still dodged the virus somehow, and glad to be here.
Fingers crossed and knock on wood. And we're going to bring in here as well our third guy from Austin, Texas, and Amplify Credit Union, Mr. Kevin Breeland. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thank you for asking.
Outstanding. Glad to hear it. And, of course, today we're going to be four guys. You may have noticed briefly we've got our old friend Marx Sterbcow here. You know him as an internationally acclaimed lawyer to the stars. He is also the managing partner at the Sterbcow Law Group. Marx asked if he could hang around today, and we're going to bill him at a discounted rate for it. Marx, how you doing, sir?
Doing fantastic, and that last check cleared too from last week. So I was very, very excited to see that. It's 2 weeks, two checks in a row that have cashed.
Can't have been ours then. Of course, this is the point of the show when we mention Content Beacon, the only and best B2B content marketing agency in the industry. And you're in luck. Today we're going to be talking a little marketing towards the end. But for now, I just want to remind you that if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone you'd like to see on the show, or just you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, give us an email, give us a shout. It's brian@contentbeacon.com or rick@contentbeacon.com. And now, back per popular request, and by popular I mean Kevin asked if he could do it this week. Kevin Breeland would like to know if we're kidding him.
I would like to first start off this segment from a dad's point of view. Now, most men, I believe, the men that I know in my life, are rather pragmatic people. My father especially was. But so this question comes from that point of view. And this question is very simple. How many times a day does FedEx, UPS, and Amazon have to come to your house? It just amazes me that they can't combine these packages and just send one. But every day, at some point in time, the doorbell rings or there's a knock on the door at least 2 or 3 times. And then the second question I have for both of y'all is, what are we doing with this stuff? Why do we need it? I never was aware that we had to have this. So that's been my COVID experience so far, is that I'm getting to know the delivery people much better than I know my own family.
Outstanding. Yeah, I would agree with you, Kevin. And it's never the same person twice in some cases. So I'm getting a lot of people. Yeah.
No, I would agree with that too.
My favorite part is when they misplace a package and they're adamant that they put it at the front door.
Oh, it's just a little scavenger hunt to brighten your day, Kevin. What else are we going to do?
Well, my wife's got one of those Ring doorbells, so we know exactly what's coming to the door. My problem is, first of all, I live in a house with 3 other people, so they're ordering stuff all the time from God knows where. So the door's ringing up, and I've got 2 dogs in the house, and it doesn't matter how many times the doorbell rings. They always react as if it's the first time they've ever heard that sound. And they go nuts. They go nuts. And I'm usually on a conference call when that happens.
Yeah. I have a yellow lab that frankly is, as cute as can be and not the smartest pup on 4 legs. And so, yes, with the Ring doorbell, which is extremely loud, you could hear it from 3 blocks away. The same reaction, like he's never heard it before. There's a villain at the front door, and by God, he's just going to tear the house down, getting to him. So, until he sees who it is, and then he starts wagging his tail, and life is good again. So,
Excellent.
A lot of reaction there in that 20 seconds.
Well, we're laughing politely, Kevin, laughing politely.
So this topic is really more of, is this overreaction? And so when I give you the topic, I'll give you my point of view. Business travel may never be the same. And this comes to us from one of the editors at LinkedIn, who is talking about how business travel is starting to see a very slow uptick, and that they make up about 10% of all the passenger. This was an interesting stat. They make up 10% of all the passengers, but 70% of the revenue. I mean, wow.
Exponential.
Which tells me that all of these companies really need to do a better job at shopping for flights, because they obviously just take the first available and on their way. So this is why many companies will survive COVID-19, because they're saving so much money on travel. They don't need to sell their products. They just, they're up $3 million this year because they're not buying business class last minute seats. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
Well, Kevin, we're going to come back to that later, actually. It's a point well taken.
But, the question is, will it be the same? I think it's an overreaction. I'm looking at taking a trip to Wyoming, and it's a golf trip. And while it's not business travel, I looked at every segment. I looked at taking the train. I looked at driving. I looked at flying. I will tell you that the airfare was incredibly low to get to Sheridan, Wyoming. It was not expensive at all. But I opted to drive. That's what I'm going to do. But my reason for it is not because of cost. It's because the plane that gets you to Sheridan is rather small. And so there's no real way to social distance. And so short of going on a plane in a hazmat suit with goggles and gloves and all of that, I just decided that given my health issues, it wasn't worth the risk. And that, it'll take me 2 days to get there, but that's fine. I'm old. What the hell?
You're only as old as you feel, Kevin. Only as old as you feel.
That's pretty old today.
What
do you all think? What's y'all's opinion on this?
Yeah, I'll only say this, Kevin. I think this is a perfect example of someone trying to create an analysis or pull insight from data without really considering what the data means. If they look just at the numbers and say, oh yeah, business travel is off and it was the major portion of what the airlines were making, that means it's going to take a long time for the airlines to recover that. That all makes perfect sense. But if you think a little bit harder, you'll realize that these companies are made up of people. And the people that are causing those expenses are top industry salespeople in all these industries. And they're recruited based on how much fun and enjoyment and ease and convenient is involved in doing their job of going around the country, meeting face-to-face with people. They will be recruited by the companies that spend those dollars on travel. And so we will quickly see that normalize probably within 12 months, and it'll come back to normal. It's really easy to take a look at data and treat it like raw numbers, but data is never raw numbers. It always comes from someplace. And we need to consider that source if we're looking for insight.
Well said, Rick. What did Mark Twain say? There's 3 kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. We can slice and dice what we want. Doesn't make the numbers wrong, but what we choose to make them say is another story. So I'm gonna echo my friend's opinions there. Marks, what did you have to say on that?
I mean, I flew last month out of New Orleans, and New Orleans just built a brand new airport back in February or January of this year, or maybe it was December. It's spectacular. And they built this thing out full of all sorts of restaurants and bars. And in June, the total passenger count for New Orleans, for the new airport, was just under 30,000 people. That was one of the 30,000. Last year at the same time, they had over 1 million. I think what you're going to see is, consequently, a lot of those restaurants and bars are no longer there at the airport. They're gone. They're out of business. They've shut them down. So one thing that I think you're going to see is you're going to see a lot less. You're going to see fewer older people flying for the foreseeable future. Fewer families flying for the foreseeable future. I mean, business travel will get back, but it's not going to be the way it was. And nobody. I mean, when I flew the other day, it was most miserable flight that I've ever had. One of the worst I've ever had, just because I had that face mask on, and that is just brutal. I mean, just having that on and being uncomfortable. Nobody wants to sit on a plane for an hour, much less 2 or 3 hours. People are going to try to find some way to get out of it, or do Zoom or something.
Marx, it's a great point. I'll be curious to see. It seems to me that a good number of businesses have kind of either, if they haven't made it mandatory, suggested strongly that folks wait until the new year. And, vaccine dependent, we'll see where the world is at that point. I can only imagine what another 6 months of 2020 will bring. But I think it'll be interesting to see how the first quarter looks, or the second quarter. And I've made it clear I despise the term "the new normal," as though everything's permanent. I don't know that all of it is, but it's going to be interesting. You almost can write off the fourth quarter here in many ways. Let's see what the new year brings. Yeah.
Well, and on that note, I wanted to bring your attention to the latest billionaire watch, because, we're always concerned about how our favorite billionaires are doing. And, I worry about this. Sometimes I have sleepless nights over it because, it's a big concern. So I wanted you to know that, our friend and maybe one day guest on our podcast, Jeff Bezos, is recovering. He has recovered all of his early losses, and on Monday set an all-time record. That record was he earned $13 billion that day. Now that day, just kind of sit back and think about that a minute. $13 billion for the day. So let's recap Jeff's last 12 months. He had a $35 billion divorce. Somewhat of a little bit of a scandal with his new girlfriend, a brother-in-law who apparently doesn't like him unless he's on the payroll, a pandemic, a huge drop in stock value, followed by a huge gain, only to set the world record of earnings in a single day by a single individual. That is a roller coaster ride, folks. Now, let me just say, that is a ride. And so I had done some research on Jeff earlier that for a podcast I was going to use, and the article that I read related to Jeff having a larger GDP than a particular country. But I want to tell you that really Jeff has a larger GDP than 117 countries. So just so you know, this is this is someone to be reckoned with. He is the man of all men. He is the boondoggle. We want to go on trips with him because obviously he's flying in the best planes, eating at the best restaurants, staying in the best hotels, or he may just buy the hotel. I don't know.
Kevin, any truth to the rumor that the next stimulus package will be sourced back to Jeff, or is that just a rumor?
It's just a rumor, but he could probably do the stimulus package on his own. I mean, if he took that one day's earnings and divided it by 365 million people, we'd all get about $400 from him. So, that's a pretty good deal. Let Uncle Jeff send some money.
Do you think he maxed out his SEP this year?
I think so.
That's what I'd be worried about. He needs some deductions. That's
yeah.
Hopefully, out somewhere. Yeah.
I will say this. The one thing, he's now worth $189.3 billion. That's a huge number, but he has a way to go still, because the all-time richest man ever in the history of the United States, by today's dollars, would be John D. Rockefeller, whose wealth by today's dollars was $417 billion. So Jeff's not even halfway yet.
And weren't we also on the gold standard back then still?
Yes, yes.
So it actually meant something.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. That's good.
And, and there was a time where Mr. Rockefeller controlled most of the gold in the country, most of the silver, most of the railroads, all of the oil, but 5% of it. And if that wasn't enough, really struggled with what to do with all of it. And was the most terrified company in the world. So that's, Jeff has a way to go, but he has at least a mentor to look up to. So that's all I got.
That's it, Kevin?
That's it.
Well, just kidding. Kevin, thanks so much. We're going to move along now to maybe a little bit more serious news here. Of course, we're aware all of you are heavy readers of the trades, and that's why from time to time we do mortgage headlines. Just a little bit of what's kind of on our radar here. And new idea here, since apparently I didn't do my research this week. We're introducing a new segment this week. Since we've got an extra member with us, I think we're going to make Marx Sterbcow do it. So Rick Grant, if you would be so kind as to create a caption, we'll call this Make Marx Do It. Marx, what's on your radar in the mortgage industry right now?
It's been kind of quiet. It's been really quiet the last week. I mean, there's been the CFPB filed a lawsuit, a fair lending and redlining lawsuit. I think that there's been somebody that got themselves in trouble with their trade association. Or I think he errantly may have, I guess, texted some things by accident on a cell phone to different people, which happens.
I'm sure it'll blow over. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that it'll definitely blow over. A total accident, I'm sure. And unfortunately, I think that what happens with those text messages, they can go awry very quickly, and pictures go awry too when you send things.
And it's I'm sure it'll all blow over anytime now. But I'm going to come back on one there. You mentioned a lawsuit, Marx, and of course lawsuits are a small part of what you do in your everyday business. What's so special about this CFPB versus Townstone? I thought the CFPB was gone by decree of the Supremes.
No, it's not gone. It's now under the jurisdiction of the president, as opposed to being a totally independent agency. But no, I represent Townstone along with Rich Horn and Sean Burke and Jim Bob Jr. And we've been dealing with this lawsuit for, I don't know, like 2017, I think, is when the first CD came.
Okay.
And it unfortunately, when you cherry pick, it looks like the Bureau cherry pick statements, put them in context, and cherry pick words and took them out of context and assumed what they thought what these words meant. And unfortunately, when you do that, or when they did that, it painted my client as a racist, and that he redlined, and fortunately, all the facts that are going to come out are going to show that this guy was far from it. His stats for peer companies in Chicago were in the top third for lending to African Americans, and they have a radio show. I think the radio show is one of the things that probably caught the Bureau's attention, and that radio show was gave the Bureau the opportunity to go through, probably over 1,000 hours, maybe more than that, of content, and they found with 4 or 5 different little terminology phrases or words going all the way back in 2014. It's a crazy suit.
Marx, for those watching who may not be, very familiar with the case, what's the CFPB claiming here? I'll note it's interesting to me to see to our friend Richard Horn on the other side of the V when he was a very prominent member of the CFPB for so long. So that says a little something to me, a lay person. But what's the CFPB claiming here? What's the enforcement action about in general? Sure,
they're claiming that my client's his speech on his radio show, which talked about, it was more of a mortgage education, but they talked about sports, they talked about politics, they talked about society, plays, talked about an array of different things, but it was kind of focused on mortgage education. And they're claiming that some of the terminology that they used in their podcast and in their radio show, among two of the three different prongs, that it constituted redlining, because some of the phrases that they used it discouraged African Americans from applying for a loan with them.
Okay, so that's the claim. Okay.
That's a claim. And the other part to it was that they also advertised on a conservative AM radio station. And because an AM radio station is, in their opinion, it didn't target certain demographics, that in itself was discriminatory and contributed to redlining as well. So effectively what the Bureau is trying to do is create something called an equal time rule. So if I advertise if I'm, XYZ Bank and I advertise for the Super Bowl for X amount of dollars, I need to allocate the same amount of money towards a protected group of individuals. And then it kind of goes into a subgroup of protected individuals, or a subgroup of protected individuals. So effectively what this could do is, if you're a trade publication and you have a magazine, or you're relying on advertising to keep your association running, or you're a newspaper or a TV station, it has a very, very strong likelihood that companies will not advertise on you, because you're not reaching the demographics that are needed, because you could inadvertently trigger a redlining claim or discrimination.
So, Mark, so then again, if I'm a mortgage lender, mortgage broker, real estate broker, that sort of thing, and I'm hearing you, I know I'll remind folks, this is the complaint. It's not the case has not been decided yet. But if the CFPB prevails on this claim, what could that mean for the typical mortgage broker or real estate broker, you name it, someone watching this podcast?
Some people, if you're a smaller player, you're not going to have the money to advertise in all these different mediums. You're only, your advertising dollars can only take you so far. So what it means is it's going to lock up a lot of companies from advertising on these mediums completely. And in others, it's going to allow them to, ignore anything that may be with a conservative bent, or a publication that might cater towards a majority of the population. That would be wiped out, because you'd have to really kind of concentrate on these protected classes and subclasses and subclasses. So it's a very slippery slope that I don't think people are present. The other piece to it as well that they kind of slipped into this complaint is that they allege that Townstone didn't have any African American loan officers, and they made a point to say that over the since 2002, I think they had 17 loan officers. None of them were African American, but during that period of time, they had something like around 80, a little over 80 employees total, and out of the 80, 9 of them were African American. They were loan processors and folks that worked in that. So they weren't loan officers, but they did loan processing and other jobs for the company. So it's almost like the Bureau is now also saying that it's not so much you have to have a diverse staff, that you actually have to have a diverse workforce based on the demographics of your particular MSA, and it has to be job specific. So and then that's really been kind of people have glanced over that. Nobody has really picked up on it, but that's kind of what.
And Mark, was there any kind of a cease and desist or any kind of notice before the suit was filed? Is this another case of the CFPB doing rulemaking by enforcement?
say that that's. Let me just say this: out of every CFPB case that I've been involved in, both directly and indirectly, this is a case that disturbs me the most because there has been. This has not been a fair process for Townstone at all. I mean, I don't. I think when it gets out through the courts that just how bad that this company has been treated and whether they provided all the documentation, all loads of evidence to prove that these things that they were alleging were inaccurate. They just dismissed it. Didn't care. We just got to get a win. We don't really care.
Kevin, you had something you wanted to ask.
Yeah, so I read all of this, and I have to say there were a couple of things that came to mind. First, I was very disturbed about the thought process behind the CFPB's stance. I just don't understand it because, for example, as a loan officer, I used to do television commercials years ago. You won't find any of them on the internet, but I did them. And I was doing it to build my business. I paid for it out of my own pocket. I wasn't reimbursed by the company. I paid for my own production crew, the whole bit. And the demographics I was trying to reach was anyone who was listening. I didn't target a particular race or sex or income level or anything. I was just, here's the time that's available. This is the amount of money I have. So how can I put that to the best use? So with that being said, reading through this, there were a couple of things that came to mind. My first part is, how did Townstone even land on the CFPB's radar to begin with, since it's a relatively small company? And two, what are they going to look like when this is all done? I mean, they're down to 3 employees now. I mean, are they even going to be in business before this is finished?
It's a great question. Both of them are great questions. The first, how it landed, quite honestly, I have absolutely no idea. That this is a company that has never had any redlining or complaints about discrimination or anything like that at all. They really they've never had any real CFPB complaints where there haven't been any complaints with the Bureau. So I don't know how it, well, I know how it came up. But I don't want to say that on the show. I'll leave it there.
Sure.
How does this company continue to operate? The company's a 3-man mortgage brokerage operation. Then they stopped being a lender back in 2018. One could surmise that maybe they were picked because the Bureau knew that they didn't have a lot of money, so we can go ahead and force this settlement down their throats and basically try to bankrupt them into settling the case. And once we have that settlement in our hands, then we can go ahead and institute this against all companies across the board, all other lenders and mortgage brokers and banks across the United States. So this is kind of their precedent-setting case. Let's go ahead and ram it down, these poor guys' throats, and really don't care about them. But this is our end game. That's the way it appears.
So one of the things that I thought of when I was reading this is you could be having a conversation with anybody. And as a loan officer, even on this show, I've said I've seen situations where when you have the 640, 650 FICO score, loan approvals are harder to come by. That would seem like to me that if the CFPB prevails in this process, it opens up the door to go after anybody who would even make any kind of comment like that, because it could also be, the reverse is, well, you're discouraging that person from applying. Well, no, you're answering a question that was asked. It's up to them to decide whether or not they want to move forward. And whether you're doing advertisement on a conservative talk radio show or you're advertising on the 6 o'clock news and paying a premium, it's pretty hard to target a specific audience. It's very, very, and we have 2 marketing guys on this podcast who can tell you that targeting a specific demographic is very, very difficult to do.
Well, I'll let this slip that the AM radio station that they advertised on also hosted the Bulls. It hosted the White Sox. It hosted a bunch of professional sporting teams. So when you look at the demographics, and that's really where they advertised a lot, was during the different sporting events that were being broadcast. When you look at the demographics,
well, you and I both know.
I think you're going to see the demographics match the makeup of the city of Chicago.
And you lived in Chicago for a while, so you understand that every sector of that city is passionate about their sports team and who they support, whether they're on the south side or the north side, or they are supporting the Bears or supporting the Bulls or whomever. They're very, very passionate about that. And that is targeting, honestly, blue collar, because you know as well as I do, Chicago is a very blue collar city, and it's a very Midwestern work ethic city, but the people who fill those stands aren't the rich. They're the blue collar. I mean, they go to those games, they support their teams, they support the Whites. I mean, hell, they supported the Cubs for over 100 years without winning the title. I mean, this is a very strong sports city.
It is. I mean, I think it's one of my favorite cities in the world. I love living up there when I did, and it was unfortunate. It was one comment, the Jungle Jewel comment that they utilized, that they tried to make that into something that it's not. When I lived in Chicago, I lived in the South Loop area, and there were no grocery stores back where I lived. And when I moved up, I was looking for one because I didn't know anything about Chicago. And the guy at the American Invesco owned the condo complex, River City. He's like, yeah, go down to the Jungle Jewel down the street. I'm like, all right, well, that sounds fine. He's like, it's a little sketchy, but that's it. So I've always known it the Jungle Jewel. Everybody in Chicago, in those neighborhoods, knew it as the Jungle Jewel. So for guys out of Washington, D.C. to now basically try to besmirch somebody by saying, oh, he used the word jungle, and use their own bias into this is absolutely, it's ludicrous. I mean, it's the equivalent of saying, hey, Kevin, we're going to go drink some Dixie beer. I mean, it's in the same sort of vein there. It's sad, the comments and phrases that they honestly did take out of context.
Well, Marx, it's interesting. We haven't seen a lot of coverage on this yet, although it's early days with the lawsuit. It sounds like we really do appreciate. You didn't know you were going to have your own segment today, did you? So sorry to spring that on you. But you were up to the task, and this is definitely something that'll stay on our radar. I know I can count on you to come back and keep us updated with what you're allowed to update us with, correct?
Absolutely.
And for my friends in the media who are watching this, if they'd like to hear a little more about this, I know you've put some information out, but this has got a lot of angles, a lot of civil liberties, a lot of constitutional elements to it as well. How can they reach you if they'd like to learn more?
You can go to respalawyer.com. That's probably the easiest way to remember and
All right.
Type it into URL.
All right. Well, Mr. Grant, we'll make sure that is in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, Marx Sterbcow, we'll be having you back, Marx. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and take a bit of a left turn, but we've kind of referred to a few elements already. We're going to go ahead and have a marketing moment. After all, 2 of the 3 guys on here do make their living doing marketing, so we hope you'll indulge us. But I think most of you watching will be a little bit interested. And, I'm asking myself a question lately, and I know Rick is as well. Why aren't more people doing organized podcasting or videos? There's really it's a very strange, it goes without saying that 2020 has been a strange year. And we know, of course, that, the fall conferences have now pretty much been canceled. The NBA, Alta, NAR, even the state levels, these are becoming virtual shows, which, we're still kind of experimenting that. We're still kind of working our way through how much we're going to get from that. And judging from what I'm seeing recently, there's not many folks out there convinced that taking that budget they'd set aside for the booth, for the demo, for the logo on the napkins, for the travel, it looks like they're not throwing it back into advertising in the trades. So it's a bit surprising to me at this point that more of you out there haven't gone all in on content marketing right now with the use of social media to promote it. Now, of course, we're seeing, and Rick pointed this out too, we're seeing a lot more one-offs. We're seeing a lot more individual efforts. We're seeing loan officers out there, some of whom do a very good job, but I'm not seeing a lot of branded or corporate level or strategic level content marketing out there. Let's not forget also that there's a lack of travel, as we talked about before. Mark's mentioned the airports without the bars and whatnot. Things are closing down, and we're talking about having very light travel for quite some time. That means, and I'm going to bring back an old marketing term, there's a lot more mind share available from the decision makers. They're not on planes. They're not sitting in as many meetings. They're not in hotels. They're sure as hell not watching the news or their favorite sports team or getting out for vacation. Okay, we got a lot of mind share available out there. And we've also seen that LinkedIn has kind of sprung to life for the mortgage industry in the past year or so. So it's interesting now. I ask myself, why aren't more wholesale lenders putting out all kinds of video or podcast resources for the brokers they'd like to join them? Why aren't more warehouse lenders proving by video or by podcast that they're actually partners for their potential correspondents? And why isn't every mortgage lender knocking down the virtual door to be a resource for real estate brokerages? So before I go on to a solution to that, Rick, you have any thoughts about kind of the environment right now for content marketing?
Well, I do, Brian. You're exactly right that there's a lot of mind share available right now. The problem is that we don't have any more, we don't have any more time or attention than we've had before. In fact, we may have less. Lending is doing surprisingly well, given everything in the industry, in the market right now. So people out there are busy. They're working hard. I've got clients that are just desperate to hire more people right now. So the old idea of, well, we can't get together with a conference, let's just throw up a webinar and expect people to give an hour of their day up to watch it, that is not going to work. They have to find a better solution. So it's a kind of an exciting time right now if they can decide how to take advantage of it.
Well, you're right, Rick. It's time to get a little creative. It's time to and I would say this, get some help too. Get some subject matter experts. Most of these companies out there do have some on hand. If not, they know a few. Get some friends. Get a little help from your friends. Have them join you. But a couple things to remember. If you are going to go out and do a little strategic podcasting, make sure it's interesting. That's rule number one. If it's boring, it's not going to be watched. It's not going to help you. Now, on the same point, make it relevant. Every mortgage broker, real estate broker, every one of us is happy to find cocktail mixes or new drink specials or whatnot. That's great. And there's a way to put it into your podcast as part of it. We want to see human beings, not logos, right? But to get the results you want, make sure what you're talking about is relevant to. Because what you might end up having is a bunch of people who really like one of your AEs, but no more business for it. The other thing is if a tree falls in the forest, right? People have to know that it's there and how to get to it, and they shouldn't have to work hard to do it. We've seen some good stuff out there that just isn't being promoted. We've probably missed some really good stuff because it's not being promoted or it's not in front of us. But, there is a lot more video, a lot more podcasts out there right now. Not everybody wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm just going to randomly search podcasts for the next 3 hours of my day. Yeah, they've got time on their hands, but they didn't get stupid with it either. So the other thing I would remind folks, make sure you've got a strategic goal to your podcasting, something beyond being seen. It's not that hard to be seen briefly, but what do you want folks to take from your podcast? What do you want them, if you ask them about your series, what do you want them to tell you about it? And most importantly, do it again. We're already starting to see some fatigue out there. We've seen some pretty interesting podcasts or short videos that are dying off already. Ain't easy, folks. It's not easy to do a podcast every week. Thank Rick Grant for 3 guys and an iPad, because Mr. Grant spends many more hours than what you see here doing the editing. So, and of course, this is the point where I mentioned that, if anyone needs a little help, I know of a B2B content marketing agency that would be delighted to help you. But and I will give a nod to our friend Marx, who has been doing content marketing since before it was a thing. When Marx mentioned his RESPA lawyer address, I go back 15 years and he was blogging. Very few attorneys were doing that then. Now, suddenly, it's the thing to do. So kudos to you, Marx. Marx, go ahead, Kevin.
That was something I kind of wanted to ask you and Rick about. You have an operation like Marx, who has grown it immensely over the 15 years. But if you were sitting down with a client similar to Marx, what would be some of the points that you would try to bring out? Some of the suggestions, some of the advice that you would point to that would be things that could be implemented into his strategy, so to speak.
We're giving Marx a marketing makeover now. All right. Well, I'll say this, Kevin. It's a great point, and then I'll let Rick jump in too. Marx is already well on his way. He's one of the more or most marketing savvy business owners I've met in the industry. And the fact that he's an attorney, this is a point of irony, by the way. If you don't know, I practiced law very briefly and poorly long ago. No longer practice, but most attorneys are just they worry about rainmaking and referral and that sort of thing. But Marx has been out there scrapping with his marketing for 20 years now, I think, close to it. So we wouldn't have much to tell him. He probably, at least not that he wouldn't already know. He's got a hub to get back to. He's got a website with his content in one place. He's not shy about getting out there, both in the media, in social media. He produces his own content. And if you even just glance off of some of Marx's material, or you see him on a podcast like, 3 guys and an iPad, you know what he's about. Okay, I don't think anyone's confusing him for he doesn't own a title underwriter or something like that. You know that he is a real estate-based attorney focused on CFPB, RESPA, and that sort of thing, not just RESPA, of course. So I'd say he's already got a big part of it down. He's consistent in his message. He's consistent in putting it out there. He's also very clear with his messaging. If we were going to deal with someone like Marx, we'd tweak him a little bit. Maybe we'd give him his own podcast. Okay. Now, of course, that takes time, and he does have a job to do during the day, so we can't always do that. But you're going to see more of this, I think, with many of the attorneys out there. And as the folks out there know, Brian Levy, Trip Riley, Chuck Kane, we're kind of inundated with attorneys on this show. We just happen to be friends with quite a few of them. And most of these guys are pretty savvy on their marketing. But Marx would not be an overhaul as makeovers go. Marx would just be maybe a little touch on the foundation or the eyeliner, and that's about it. I don't know, Rick, what would you do with Marx's operation if he came to you?
No, I would agree with that completely. I'd have a hard time changing anything about Marx. It'd be easier to talk about you, Marx, if you weren't on the line. But he has a way with him that works really, really well. I don't think I'd change that. But Kevin, if I was coming up to somebody new, I'd say they really need to think about a two-prong approach. First, avoid the big mistake almost every marketing agency makes, and that's to go in and start saying, What do you want to say? What do you want to say? What do you want people to know about you? People don't care about us. People don't care about you. They care about themselves and their problems. So the first question is always, what problems do they have? The people you want to work with, what problems do they have? If you can answer those problems, well, now you have a chance of doing some content marketing. And then the second piece of advice is think in terms of big stories. Every time we get Marx on the line, and that's a thing I'll come back to about podcasting in a minute. Remind me, Brian, if I forget.
Don't forget, Rick.
Okay. Every time we get Marx on the line, he brings us back to respalawyer.com. Brilliant. He's got one place, all of his content, easy to remember, drives him right back to it. That's his big story. And even though he does a lot of other stuff besides that, that's his anchor, and it works great. Finding those big stories, those anchor stories in your company that you can build big pieces of content around and then split up into all these other additional pieces of content marketing is the answer for economically creating that kind of marketing campaign. And Brian and I have been doing that for a long, long time. But speaking of the podcasting, one of the reasons I think that's so difficult, Brian, and you mentioned this earlier, and some of these shows are already dying, is because it can be very difficult to continue to talk about interesting things on a podcast that people will tune in and really want to hear about. Now, we're lucky. We have very smart and experienced friends. So the people that you've seen on this show and on it right now are incredible. Not me and you, but other. So
Agree.
Yeah. So, but not everybody has access to that, right? So sometimes you have to reach out and build those relationships and bring those people together and form those partnerships so that you have those stories to tell. And if you do that, that will fuel content marketing in a very powerful way. It's an overall strategy. Just like Brian said earlier, it's not a one-off thing where we let's throw up a webinar and spend our budget that we would have spent in a conference. No. Think about, what do you want to do by the mid-year next year? What do you need to accomplish? And how can you take that budget and do that over the next 6 to 12 months? And that's a process, but it's a fun process.
Well, and Rick, you make several great points there. I'm just going to touch on one or two of them, and then maybe we'll move on here. But you talk about Rick. Rick is really big on storytelling, and I always chuckle when I hear the marketing gurus out there who solemnly advise you that B2B marketing is an entirely different animal. Well, yeah, there are some differences. There are things you maybe can't get away with that you could in B2C business to consumer marketing. There are things there that you may not be able to pull over to business. But I always remind my clients that the second B in B2B stands for people, not logos. And people like stories. Anytime I'm advising a client who's doing a presentation or a speech, now, it's usually a lot better if that story ties in somehow to what you're trying to get across. But people still listen to stories over buzzwords, hands down. I don't care if it's in a business setting or a consumer setting. So, and the other thing I'll mention is we've all met folks who want to do maybe a single marketing project and then move on and reap the benefits. And that's like saying I'm going to eat once and for all today. Okay, it's unfortunately. Rick and I would be even more blessed than we are if we could sell single marketing projects that just get it all done and go away. Even Super Bowl ads don't do that, guys. So content marketing is very much that case. You've got to be out there regularly. You've got to keep delivering, and that can be exhausting, especially when it's not your primary job in life. You know, if you're a salesperson, if you're an EVP of operations or something like that, chances are pretty good you've got enough on your plate to fill your time. And for those of you hiring an intern or somebody's niece to do it 5 hours a week, well, you get what you pay for. And on that note, we've got a top 10 for you this week. Let's jump right into that. And this week's top 10 is 10 things you can do with a mask besides slow the spread of COVID. Number 10, sanitize your kitchen table. Number 9, knock off a convenience store. Number 8, relive those fun-filled, acne-dominated teen years. Number 7, jump out of a closet and scare the hell out of your kids. Number 6, jump out of a closet and scare the hell out of your neighbor's kids. Number 5, rock your police mugshot after jumping out of your neighbor's closet and scaring their kids. Number 4, dramatically improve your poker face. Number 3, detain protesters without probable cause or legal repercussions. Number 2, make them think a little bit. Wear it over your eyes instead of your mouth and nose. And number 1, tie back your mullet before heading out to the anti-mask protest. And with that, I want to thank our dear friend Marx Sterbcow. Again, you can reach him on in our show notes. Marx, did you ever get that check from your last appearance?
It didn't cash. That's why I came back for this week.
Yeah, a little late. I was going to ask you to hold that.
2 in a row. I mean, now I'm thinking, that third check that you guys may send. Let's hope the income's coming in because
Let's be clear. You recognize the gravy train you got on right away.
Well, Marx, stick around after I'll get you our Bitcoin information. With that, as always, thanks to my dear friends Rick Grant and Kevin Breeland. And you'll be pleased to know that I got a battery charger for my 2nd generation iPad, but now the screen's cracked and you can thank my daughter for that. So I think it's time to go. Mr. Grant, take us home, please.